Welcome to Wake, a cold reading of James Joyce's Finnegans Wake, just to hear it out loud. Join Toby Malone and TJ Young, along with some special friends, as we puzzle our way through what we once thought was an unreadable book to produce a surprisingly listenable podcast. Welcome to a bonus episode of Wake, the podcast that translates, transmutates, and transliterates everything in sight, all in the name of fulfilling a long-held bucket list item, reading James Joyce's Finnegans Wake out loud just once. I'm your host, Toby Malone, joined once more by the man who's been with me every step of this journey, TJ Young. Hi, TJ.
Oh, hi, Toby. How are you?
I'm great. We're getting into the beginning of winter time with all the winter weather. It hasn't started snowing here in Toronto. It's been raining, but I think the snow is coming. How about there in Pittsburgh?
It's snowing here in Pittsburgh, which is fantastic. And I went and I saw, this is going to date this episode, I saw the Wicked movie last night. And as I came out, it was snowing. I was like, it is magic.
Excellent. I think we're taking the whole family to see it on Saturday. So looking forward to that. And today is another bonus episode of Wake. As we roll toward the end of the book, we're finding more and more reasons to pause to chat about Joyce and the Wake outside of the structure of the reading. And this week, we are joined by one of the most interesting people I know, who claims to be one of the least interesting people ever, which I don't buy for one moment, Ana Dahlberg. Welcome to Wake. Hi, Ana.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, of course.
I am really a boring person. You guys have
no way.
I failed to believe that.
Yeah, that's not true, because you are one of the few people I know who has read Finnegans Wake all the way through. And
I read it.
And I got a front row seat from our Instagram connection as you read your way through. So tell us a little bit about yourself, because you're from Portugal originally. Is that right? Portugal. But now you're living in Sweden. So that in itself is very interesting.
So I'm Portuguese. I live in Sweden, in Malmö, in southern Sweden. Husband is Swedish. That's why I moved here. I had no interest in moving to another country, frankly. And I'm an F&B manager in a hotel. That's a food and beverage manager.
Right.
It is not my first career.
Okay.
You want to know what my first career was?
Of course.
I was a language and literature teacher before.
Aha, okay. So
and you claim you're not interesting.
See? There you go. And things slotting into place here. So the fact that you've got all these languages, how many languages do you have command of?
Command of none at the moment.
Well, I mean, reading Finnegans Wake, I think Joyce reminds us that none of us even have command over English, because he's showing us how much more there is.
So I speak Portuguese, obviously. English, we speak English home. Swedish, more or less. I can read in Spanish, Italian, and French. I studied Latin and German, but you studied and then you don't. You end up forgetting things.
Yeah, so
that helped a little bit with the Wake, to be honest.
Right. Well, as you say, a very boring person. I think you listed 8 languages there. So this is absolutely so that's wonderful. So you have a relationship with Joyce. You were saying
it's complicated at the moment. It's complicated. My relationship with Joyce.
So tell us when you first encountered Joyce. What was your first one?
So I have a notebook.
Yes.
So now about me and about my relationship with Joyce. I asked for some topics because I get nervous speaking in English. So I first read Dubliners many, many years ago. It was not part of when I studied literature. I did 2 years of English literature and 1 year of North American literature university. No Joyce. But I read Dubliners in English many years ago. I didn't enjoy it, to be honest. Then some years ago, I read Berlin Alexanderplatz.
Oh, that book.
I love Berlin Alexanderplatz. And in the end of it, if you've read it, he says like, "Oh, people compare me to." And I had taken Joyce out of my life, so I'm not going to put up with this. And in the end, he says like people compare Berlin Alexanderplatz to Ulysses, but I was halfway writing this book when I first read Ulysses. Mm-hmm. So I said, oh, there is something here for me. So I decided I'm going to read Ulysses. and I'm very much like this. I think if there is something that people that listen to me with my yada yada is this: when you want something, when you decide to do something, just do it. And I decided to change jobs, I just did it. Decided to read Ulysses, I just did it. With Awake reading, I don't know, but I went through it. So I decided I'm going to read Ulysses. So I talked to some friends here on Instagram, some Portuguese friends at the time. They're still Portuguese, and you know, talking to people about Ulysses is like talking about, it's like an AA group. Hello, my name is Nana. I have tried to read Ulysses 5 times. So we're like, we are going to read it. So we got together in a group and we made a plan. I reread Dubliners, that second time I left. We read Portrait, we read other things, we read the guides, we prepared. I don't know if you guys have seen inside my Portuguese Ulysses. It is all marked. But when I started reading Ulysses, I could already walk those streets, thanks to Google Maps also.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time we went to Dublin, we were taking the bus from the airport to the city center, and I was like, this is Echo Street. I knew. So I knew before. So I had read so much about Ulysses, so many guides, so much that when I started reading Ulysses, it was more or less like coming home. I knew that some parts were going to be hard and then kind of impossible. But I was so happy. It is so beautiful. I remember the first lines that made me fall in love with the text itself, not with the explanation about the text. So this was it. I absolutely in love with Ulysses. This group, many people that were in this group reading in Portuguese finished it. I kept reading in Portuguese and English at the same time, because there is something called the Joyce project online, that is the text of Ulysses, with links to everything, with history and food and the characters that are real people that are shown in Ulysses. So for me, Ulysses was a challenge, of course, but it was more a challenge of discovery. And what I always loved about Ulysses since I started reading is that it is endless to start with. You can always learn more about it. And it's a book written and created in a way that even if you don't read the guides, you can still communicate with this book. Not maybe in such a deep level, you won't understand the jokes about the people that actually lived in Dublin, or the ones that were arrested, or the ones that died because they ate poisoned or spoiled shellfish. You will not understand this. But you will, and you cannot walk those streets, but you will understand some part of it. So after this, I kept going with Ulysses and everything about Ulysses. I show you this pile that I post now just about Glasnevin. I have like 5 books.
Yeah.
I love, it's one of my favorite books ever.
And so you read it first in Portuguese, and then when did you read it in English?
I've read it at the same time in Portuguese and English, because I was reading it online in the Joyce project, and it's wonderful because you can catch some differences in the translation, and then I read it again and again. And what I did this last time, that was before Bloomsday this year, was I listen in English and I read in Portuguese at the same time. And that is really great. It's really, I'm not a big fan of audiobooks or something. I read with my eyes. But to do this is so wonderful, because there are parts of Ulysses I think I know by heart by now. So you compare it immediately. Sometimes I read a little bit in English but the thing is that my Portuguese one, that is this one.
Oh wow!
This book is going with me to the forever. You see, I have the pictures of the places. So wow. I have trouble leaving this one behind and passing just for the one in English, although I understand the one in English with no problem. Look, this part is the one when in Hades. That is one of my favorite episodes.
Right.
This is a little flower I brought from the graveyard. This is a picture of Parnell's grave.
And for the listeners who can't see the visual here, is that Anna's got this incredibly annotated book filled with little post-it notes, and annotations and photographs that are stuck in there. It's what incredible artifact is this paratextual material that's really.
You see why I have trouble in going from this one to the one in. I have a page here. It's my favorite page because I'm not in a hurry. Let me see if I find it. It's episode 5. So it's before this. It's before Hades. It's from Martha. It's when. Let's see. Oh, if I don't see it here. So I have trouble moving to where I'm. I can see immediately where I am just from reading a sentence. Potato I have. Oh, yes.
That's incredible. TJ, do you have any books like this that you go back to over and over? Like with this kind of... No, I just...
I mean, I think part of it is, and I think that you'll appreciate this, that when you are teaching any sort of academic writing or anything like that, most of your reading is from your students. Most of your reading is essay. You know, I teach playwriting. And so most of the things I read are for academic purposes.
Exactly.
And then every once in a while when I pick up a book, I'm like, I just want this to be fun and kind of turn my brain off for a little bit. So there hasn't been anything that I felt like I've been able to meditate on in this way.
I don't know if you can see. This is when Martha sends him a letter with some yellow flower. With a yellow flower inside.
Wow, it's
so
incredible.
I have trouble moving to the English one because this one has a little bit of it's mine. This one is my Ulysses.
Yeah.
I completed this Ulysses. You know what I mean? I completed
amazing.
This one.
We take it to the grave.
This is exactly. Exactly. So this is my Ulysses.
That is incredible. So is there a standard Portuguese translation, or are there multiple?
We have several. We have.
Is there one? Is there some that better? Some better than others?
I have this one from Cláudio d'Água that I really like. There is one from Livros do Brasil, and there is one from Portuguese from Brazil by Caetano Galindo. He has also attempted a translation of a part of Finnegans Wake, but I've never read it. And the one that is in Sweden is in Dublin, the translation that they use in the reading group, it's the one from Portuguese from Brazil.
Right.
I have this one and I compare it to the original. There is a part, for example, that in my book it says, Father, that you are in heaven. Like a little bit of a praying thing if you are Catholic. But the original is, Father, you are not in heaven.
Right.
So there was a fail here in my translation.
That's
and because I was reading at the Joyce project at the same time, one line, I got it immediately.
Right.
I have this in histories, in stories in Instagram from some years ago.
And do you find that these translations are tailored towards the local reader in terms of a Portuguese sensibility or idiom or certain kinds of phrases that would be, because I just think about translations. So, for example, Hugo's translation of Shakespeare into French is heavily weighted towards phrases and idiom that is familiar to a French reader, and a lot of these things will be not exactly literal translations, but translations, parallel translations. Do you find that there's a lot of that?
Not really.
No.
Not
okay.
really.
I mean, I guess Ulysses is such an Irish book that it's very hard to make it relevant to a Portuguese.
I mean, in terms of puns and idioms, it's not so different. There is a little explanation if things are like a joke or something.
Right.
But to be honest with you, when it comes to Ulysses, because it has, I've read the guides and so many things about it. It's almost in a universal language for me. Sometimes I don't really know if it is Portuguese or English.
Wow,
because I read it so carefully in Portuguese, that the things make sense for me when I read in English. I don't really realize if I don't know a certain word.
Wow.
Because I can translate it immediately. I remember which part it was.
Huh.
The hardest part, I think, in when it comes to Ulysses, is the part that he goes through history of literature. Some things I can more, because we also had medieval literature in Portuguese, and so I think from the translator's perspective, I think did a great job, because he tried to use a language that was similar to ours back in that period. It's a beautiful translation, this one. The other ones I don't know, to be honest. I have a friend who has read all the translations for fun, but
have you tried? So, is there a Swedish translation? Have you tried that?
I have not tried, and my husband read it in English directly.
Oh, okay, right.
You know, my husband play Bloomsday for real. So I like you are going to read. You are going to read Ulysses. So otherwise, you cannot dress as Mr. Bloom if you don't read Ulysses. And
so you did Bloomsday in Dublin?
I do Bloomsday.
Wow!
You have never seen my pictures. What are you talking about?
Oh well, yeah, sure. I'm opening things up for the listener. So tell us about your visits to Dublin and your interaction with Joyce over there.
It's like our Christmas, to be honest with you, because it is like finding lots of people like you with the same interest. Everywhere you go, you hear a person quoting a sentence from Ulysses. There are many people in Dublin that celebrate Bloomsday without having read Ulysses,
right?
And that dress up and stuff.
We had a guest on. The episode hasn't come out yet, but we had a guest last week. One of our listeners who's in Dublin, Sarah Kane. She participates.
We follow each other already.
Yeah, that's right. So Sarah, she participates in Bloomsday, and she said the first time she did Bloomsday, she'd never read she never read Ulysses, and so she said that she felt like a lifeguard who can't swim because she was so immersed in all of these Joyceans who were around, and she felt like a fraud because she hadn't yet read it.
There are many people who dress up and have never read, and there are many people who read this year in June. There was a family from the United States, I think. They were in the same play that we were, and they had a little child, and he had a T-shirt that said Ulysses. He was not dressed up or anything. and their kid was called Ulysses.
Oh, wow!
And they were like, we are going to watch a play now. Just if you want to run, but just be quiet.
Oh,
and then we talked to them later on in another place. So it means very little, to dress up. There are many people that have read it and love it, and it doesn't matter. People celebrate. It's the most important, I think.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. It'd be very interesting to poll the attendees of Bloomsday to figure out how many people have named their children Ulysses and Leopold and Molly and Finnegan.
My next cat will be called Mr. Bloom.
Yes. Not
I don't
Mr.
have children, so I cannot name children.
Not Mr. Earwicker. You're
No, God, no.
No.
Of course not. Oh, that's amazing. So we first sort of connected on Instagram because we were reading The Wake, and you were actually listening to the podcast while you read The Wake. And
so you've been hearing me struggle as I get through the language.
You were struggling while we were struggling.
I so understand.
So what you sent me one of the most funny direct messages I've ever received when you said that Finnegans Wake just wasn't interested in having a relationship with you, and so you came to Finnegans Wake as this lover of Joyce's work, having rediscovered Dubliners, having read Portrait, having read Ulysses, having immersed yourself, and now you were doing what we were doing, which is completing the set by reading The Wake. And it was not a positive experience. It sounds like, because you were doing the similar kind of research. It looked like you were going back and forth. So tell us a little bit about how you worked your way through the wake.
Let me turn my pages to how did I get to the wake in my notebooks. Well, I never thought I was going to read Finnegans Wake.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I don't remember when, but not this past time. When we were in Dublin, Magnus was like, "Oh, I think you guys noticed this in an episode that there are not so many Finnegans Wake." And in Dublin for Bloomsday, it is crazy with the bookshops. I mean, there is Ulysses and James Joyce, everything about. I see people buying. I think these books are never going to be open, but because it's Bloomsday, everyone wants to buy. But not so many Finnegans Wake. And Magnus, once we were like, because I was buying all the crazy books I have about James Joyce and the people that are real people that made their way to Ulysses or the houses or this or that. And Magnus was like, I'm going to read Finnegans Wake. I was like, oh, good luck with that. So he bought this one.
Same edition we have. That's
the one.
As you see, it's not. I mean, inside it's pretty colorful, but outside, exactly. And I was like, I don't care. Then, because I knew what was coming, but I couldn't imagine it was so terrible. Then I saw Seth reading it. I'm the voice of reason, the voice of ignorance, not like all the other people that love it. Then I saw Seth reading it.
Right. And he'll be appearing on the podcast in a few weeks.
I know, he told me. And then I told him I'm afraid of reading it because I'm not a native speaker. And he said, oh, that won't help you.
Yeah.
It's very true.
So I thought, well, hell, why not? I agreed with Max. I said, let's make this a love project. You have to read Finnegans Wake. Then another friend was also reading. I said, whatever, this cannot be that different from Ulysses. Hardly did I know. So this is how I ended up here. This is how and in my first session was about this, but I don't think many people know. Because I started with the guides. I used the same thing that I used to read Ulysses. I start with the guides, and then I would reread the guides at the same time I was reading the chapters or episodes, and write everything down. And I could see immediately from the guides, because each guide says a different thing. And in the guides, as you guys know, something, no one knows what this means. So I could understand immediately that was for something. And I wrote in my first page, that's from the beginning of June. It says in Portuguese, if Seth did it, it can be done. And every time I despaired, I would come in, it can be done, it can be done. So I have read it? I don't know.
Well, we had that.
I know you guys have talked about it also, I believe.
We talked about that idea that, it's like going to an art gallery, and if you lay eyes on every painting, have you actually seen the art gallery? Similar to this, if you've looked at every word or if you've spoken every word, can you say you've absorbed it? Probably not, but it's certainly a start. And it's like you say, you started with Dubliners and you weren't sure about it, and then you went back to it, and then it opened up. So I feel as though there has to be a step, or it's like I always say to my kids, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And that's the same thing with the Wake. I don't think anyone's going to get it right away.
For me, I think that the thing that is going to stick with me, because I'm telling you both right here, right now, and Toby already knows this is the one read of this book that's going to probably happen, at least in the foreseeable future. But, it is kind of like that art gallery thing where I can go to a museum all day, but I'll remember like 5 or 6 pieces that I'm like, this I can hold on to for one reason or another. As opposed to walking away and being like, I understand the entirety of the novel. Because most of it, especially when we're reading, I'm like, this is flowing through me, not my brain. It's not sticking to any frontal cortex or anything like that. It's just happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I think and I know that, we're 500 pages in at this point. We are, we've been talking about this forever, about how trying to let go of meaning, but I find that really difficult to do. I still find that really difficult to do because, especially as someone who has trained myself to exact meaning in the words that I write and asking my students to do the same thing. And as a storyteller myself, I understand, at least from my perspective, the importance of words and word choice and word placement. And so when he breaks it all apart, it is still so hard for my brain to wrap around, like, this was a conscious choice and it means something to him. And the fact that it doesn't permeate, kind of hits me.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
You guys have this one?
No, we don't do any research at all. we do a little bit of research, but we certainly don't
This is like my favorite writer talking about one of my other favorite writers.
So what is the book? Just to give the title, the Middle Ages of James Joyce, the Aesthetics of Chaosmus. Umberto Eco. Okay, great. Okay, so I had no idea that Eco had written about Joyce. This is how much research we do here on Wake, folks.
Do you think my research has helped me? I don't think so.
I think no, because you got to the end. So, and I think
at what cost? At what cost?
At what cost?
4 months. First time I read Ulysses, it took me 1 month. I sit here. This is my kitchen where I am. Right. I sit here at the table. Finnegans Wake took me 4 months. And it's not 4 months. I read on the bed like 2 pages a day. It's 4 months. I come from work. I sit here. It's 4 months it's my free days. I do 12 hours of Finnegans Wake sitting here.
What?
So, I didn't take it as a joke. I'm very serious in the way I read. That's why I have trouble saying that I read Finnegans Wake. Because when I read a book, I expect to get something from the book. Mm-hmm. I give a lot and I expect something back.
Right. Yeah.
And I need something to anchor myself to.
Right. Yeah.
I understand that. Like there needs to be a level of equivalent exchange given from the literature. And I think it's the reason why when we read a bad book, we're angry. We're like, I'm like, I gave you something of me. And you gave me nothing.
Is nothing else.
Right.
Right.
And this starts already bad here in the introduction.
Right. Oh yeah. The introduction.
Finnegans Wake introduction.
Seamus Dean. Yeah. He's
because they say something like this. The reader has to not think about plot.
Yes.
No one is going to read Finnegans Wake because of the plot. No one comes from Stephen King to Finnegans Wake.
Right.
So we know what we are getting into.
Well, the first sentence of the introduction is, the first thing to say about Finnegans Wake is that it is, in an important sense, unreadable.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, please do go on, Seamus.
I have it underlined.
You're really hooking us in here, making us feel excited about the journey. So what did Eco say that was useful to you?
Oh, let me. I love Umberto Eco, and I know he's a big fan of Finnegans Wake and Ulysses. But I'm saving this book to read in February. I always read Umberto Eco in February, but I could not resist some parts about Finnegans Wake. It says like this: it may seem that Ulysses violates the techniques of the novel beyond all limit, but Finnegans Wake passes even this limit. It may seem that Ulysses demonstrates the possibilities of language, but Finnegans Wake takes language beyond any boundary of communicability. It may seem that Ulysses represents the most arduous attempt to give physiognomy to chaos, but Finnegans Wake defines itself as cosmos and microcosm and constitutes the most terrifying document of formal instability and semantic ambiguity that we possess.
Oh, wow. That's
amazing. True, isn't it?
It's true.
And he goes on. And this is the problem. I say I have to anchor myself to something. He says like this: a search of the poetics of the wake. A poetics understood as a system of operative rules that preside in making the work, becomes a desperate task because the various drafts show that these rules change as the work progresses and that the final design is very different from the first one. The book, as we shall see, is a continuous poetics in itself, and any examination of the work from any of its parts will help us clarify the ideas upon which it was based. So, and then it goes on with the dream and the logic of the unlogic of the dream. But the thing is that when I read, I don't read because of plot or because of this or because of that, but there has to be something that we can follow, and that the most basic thing it's the plot. It's like we identify with the character, or we want to follow the character, and then as a higher level, let's say like this, is we can interpret by ourselves. But this mechanism that Eco also mentions, that he says that a text or novel or a book is a lazy mechanism that the reader has to set in motion. There has to be a mechanism there that we understand and that we can start moving. Here in the wake, for me, it was I couldn't even see the mechanism. I could only see separate parts of a machine that I could not put together. I was so worried about trying to understand the words. Yeah. What is this?
And you didn't find the human level of the Earwicker family anchored you at all, like with, sort of just as I find that the regular references to HCE and ALP and the kids, at least sort of as touchstones, or every time he comes back to a trope or to a kind of pun, or every time you see something with the initials HCE, I always feel relieved to go, oh, there he is. He's just bobbed his head up again.
I mean, I cannot say I hated it. To be honest, I cannot say. I understand some of the points. There is a part here that talks about Escoffier. It was a very famous chef, and he calls him Ice Coffee.
Right.
And there are many things like this through the book. So there are many little hearts around the thing. I try to hold on to at least a part of the family. I like the part of, I think it's the part of the quiz. I've put here some of the parts that I like. The part of the quiz when it's easy talking. Right. And she's talking. Yes. I didn't see my books of the guides for this time. I wanted to see how much I could remember. So if I say something wrong.
No.
But she's like talking in front of the mirror for what I can remember. So there are two easies. Right. And this young girl already dreaming about men and stuff. So I don't say I identify, obviously, but I could grab to that.
Right.
And there are many parts here that I think are beautifully written, but it is so much. It is so
and
much.
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say I feel Toby clinging on to HCE. You saying that there are moments of the family, and in my head, I will admit I've kind of abandoned both of those things, and I've leaned into just finding the poetry when I can hold it. If there's a gorgeous line or a gorgeous passage, and I always highlight it and circle it and underline it, and the passage where there's the older gentleman telling the young girl, like, we could look at the stars and be like, there's something about those moments that I'm like, this is the thing I can do.
I mean, that and the dirty jokes. You like those too?
I do like the dirty jokes.
Oh, he's so dirty, this guy.
He's so dirty. And
he's so dirty.
And at first, I will admit, when we first started reading, I was like, maybe it's just me. Maybe I am just wildly perverted. And then, as we got in, I was like, oh no, he's just saying it outright, and I should just believe it when I read it. But those are the things that I've kind of like started to seek in our reading, because I've, about a quarter of the way through, I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to know what HCE did until Toby reads me the summary at the end of the episode.
And it's so funny that you try to anchor yourself to the dirty parts. I try to anchor myself to food.
Yeah, see?
And there are several things about food here, and one you guys haven't read yet, but there is he changes clothes and then he reads. He eats a lot. So I have all the parts. It's in the third book already.
Right.
And one of the things he drinks, that's why you guys saw me drinking something. It's a dessert Greek wine that I bought. And I thought, when I finish Finnegans Wake, I will open this bottle. Because it's mentioned in the book. But when I finished, I didn't have the sense of, wow, I finished. You know, because I was like, does it, some parts I more or less understand, some parts I don't. So I was just reading and listening and underlying if I like the part. But I want more of a book.
Yeah.
For me, reading is not jumping on the treadmill while you listen to a book.
Right.
There is more than read to this.
Yeah.
So if you read my post in Instagram, I say I've experienced Finnegans Wake.
Right.
Yeah.
I cannot say that I've read it like I want to read a book. So I only opened this bottle now. So then I'm going to put an end to Finnegans Wake now forever.
We are very honoured to be joining you in the ending.
I know it's early for you guys.
No, I mean, but, I feel as though
it's a Greek dessert wine that he drinks.
We'll look out for that reference. But I feel as though the idea that Wake can't be read on its first pass through, its first experience, is probably very valid. And I think we often sort of attribute thoughts to Joyce and say, oh, Joyce would have liked this, or Joyce would have. But I feel as though Joyce would agree with your assessment, saying, yes, you've experienced it, now keep going and allow it to loop back. And to there's something very frustrating about getting to the final sentence and it doesn't end, but it just directs you back to the first sentence.
I knew that already. I was not like,
yes,
I was not expecting to know something more.
Our great colleague Neil Wexler, who appears often on our podcast, says that the final 10 pages of Finnegans Wake are the 10 greatest pages written in the history of the English language. Your comment on that?
The thing, my biggest, not regret, but what I hold against Finnegans Wake is that I cannot communicate with Finnegans Wake without being through a guide.
Right.
Yeah.
And the book should give you the tool to communicate with it.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think for me, this is what distinguishes great literature. Because you go to read The Name of the Rose, you don't need to go any further. At the first level, you can just read a crime story there.
Right.
But you can read many other things, depending of how, I don't want to say developed you are as a reader, but how much you want to invest in that book as a reader.
Right.
This book doesn't give me the possibility of just being myself and facing this book.
Right.
So this is the thing I have. And even in the last pages, I think they were beautiful. And I think for me they were most beautiful because like at the end is near. But there is the part that she's the river, and the river is going faster and faster, and there are leaves in her mouth, so the words go a little bit even stranger than usual. I know this because I have read in the guides.
Right. Yeah.
Do you understand what I mean? Because Absolutely. If I was alone with this book, how different is this from all the gibberish that is before? I don't know.
Yeah, and it's likely that Neil has that evaluation because of he studied it and he's read it over and over and he is familiar. And it's like that the diagram that we've talked about, Laszlo Moholy-Nagy's diagram of the wake with all of the sunbeams coming out of the center, which has certain levels and some of the different kinds of levels of the ways of reading it. You would expect that one of those levels would be able to read it literally, but it's not possible. And so without that being possible, then yes, it becomes kind of like a battle of attrition of just slogging your way through, reading out of spite or reading out of determination just to have say you've conquered that mountain.
I mean, I have, now that I'm going through it, I see lines that I have written so beautiful, this part.
Mm-hmm.
Because I did it like this. I read the guides, and then I read the chapters while I was writing the things down, and then I listened to it afterwards. I started with YouTube. There are maybe the 8 first episodes in YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Then I started with you guys also. And then in the end, because you were still behind, there is a beautiful reading in Audible that I end up. I don't do audiobooks, but I just started subscribing to Audible so I could read it. Because since I'm not a native speaker, sometimes when you read the word, it's easier for you. So this is how I read it. And in this parts that I sometimes put the heart and say, so beautiful how this scene sounds. There's the part that he calls, I think it's novelita or novelinha. I think it's too easy, and in my language, nuvem is cloud. So he's calling him little cloud. You guys have passed that part already. Mm-hmm. And in Ulysses, both Bloom and Stephen, they also see a little cloud in the sky. So I can make this kind of connections, but it's
well, and it's endless. It's endless. It's endless unless you put an end to it, as you clearly have with the Wake. Yeah. So you had some favorite sections. I mean, I feel as though what you've experienced is what we've experienced, which is we got a sense of his tone in book 1, and then we got really thrown for a loop in book 2 because he clearly had written that at a different time, and then came back to book 3 where suddenly it's a little bit more accessible, a little bit more fun. And so the fact that he was writing it out of order and throwing it all together and really responding to his critics, who everyone hated it, had to publish the examination, and he was determined to continue writing it. But he finished it like you finished it. Yeah, it's just slogging your way through. And I guess once you get past the point of no return, you've got to finish it, because you could have walked away.
No, I cannot. I cannot walk away.
I'm still. You need to come back to the fact that you told us that you're not an interesting person, but you still will sit on a day off for 12 hours reading Finnegans Wake, which is maybe one of the most interesting. That is
because I had an experience with the book before, one of these books that everyone has to read, and there are 2 books that have created anxiety in me in my life. This one, Finnegans Wake, and the other one. And I went through half of the book, and I was like, Anna, you're going to have a break, and then you return for the second part. And it took me years to return to the second part. I had to start from the beginning. It was Don Quixote.
Right.
And some parts are fantastic, but have you guys read it? There are these parts when they are in the inn, and all the other stories start coming, endless stories about this and this and this. It has nothing to do with Don Quixote anymore. You don't know where you are. You just, God. And I like medieval literature, so I was super like this for Don Quixote. So I had to start all of, and it was like one chapter a day, and let's go. So I knew when I started Finnegans Wake that I was not going to stop, no matter what. I was not going to stop.
You have to keep that momentum. Yeah, I understand.
I took the book and the guides and everything to Greece on holidays, getting up on. I need to go on with Finnegans Wake.
The discipline. Wow.
Discipline.
That's amazing. So I think I know the answer to this, but will you ever revisit Finnegans Wake?
No.
Definitive in your answer.
No, what do I take from Finnegans Wake? I understand it is. I understand because I read the guides. Let's put it like this. I cannot have a relationship with this book. This book doesn't care about me.
Right.
And I don't think that novels or books or writers should write focused on the perspective of the reader. I don't believe in that, but I believe that the book must have in itself the tools to allow the reader to create a relationship.
Right. Yeah.
This book hasn't.
Does that change your perspective on Joyce himself as a writer? The fact that he does.
I was very hurt with him, to be honest. I think he wrote 60-something pages of him dancing with himself.
Right.
But it was painful, and I felt that I was not worthy of reading work from Joyce. No. It was frustrating. It created a lot of anxiety because I wanted to understand. As I told you, I cannot just pass my eyes and be happy with it.
Do you read aloud? Like we're
I
reading?
I do. My poor husband. Now I'm reading The Death of Virgil aloud in Portuguese. The 6 my husband puts up with. So it was painful. And then on the even worse than all this was that I knew that October is going to be a complicated month for me at work. So I was like, I give myself like June, July, August, and September to read this book. 4 months and hard work. But I didn't know that my October, I finished, I think, in the end of September. I must have the date here. But I didn't know my October was going to be so complicated at a personal level.
Right.
That I don't have the date here. That my cat would die. And if you see, there are many pictures that when I post about Finnegans Wake, there's a black cat.
Yes.
Sometimes there is one that I'm listening to you guys. Then there's a black cat. Just always on top of Finnegans Wake. And I was always telling Magnus, take her away. Like, I need to read Finnegans Wake. I need to listen. I need to read. And it's, I almost have this, what is the word when you have something against that person?
A grudge?
Yeah, exactly. Almost against Finnegans Wake and against Joyce, because I could have spent more time with my cat. You know, I was like, no. Finnegans Wake. For what did I get back? Anxiety. Morrissey can write a song about this. Anxiety, pain, frustration. A love that you get nothing back from. It's my experience with Finnegans Wake. It's a song from Morrissey. I hope you guys have more fun. It gets better for when you as closer you get to the end, the better. I mean, the less painful it gets.
We're noticing that.
Yeah, because and I've told Seth about it. Maybe it's because the sun is coming, so you see better.
Oh yeah.
I mean, in a metaphorical way, but the speech is not so because I understand what he's doing. You know, the language of the dreams, and we don't really know, we don't really see, we don't really listen. So we kind of interpret the words as we think we are listening.
Right.
I understand, but it makes it almost impossible for us from the beginning. You know, you guys remember the beginning that it says even Adam.
Yes.
Even Adam. And I had read in the guides that it was the river is going backwards. Do you remember? So Eve comes before Adam, not Adam and Eve. This is what I read in the guides, and I don't have the tools to question the guides.
Right.
This annoys me a little bit, you know. And then I read or listened to someone saying, "Oh no, it's because it's a feminist reading. He's doing a feminist thing, so he's putting Eve first. Why? Why is it written in the book? This,
yeah,
you know, or no, it's because Eve, it's the creator of all sin. It's because of Eve that things went wrong. That's why she comes first. It's a book about sin. Where is it written in the book?
This is why we don't do the research. This is why we don't read those guides, because you can unpeel the onion, but you're never going to get to the center. So as soon as we start saying we're going to do the research on every episode, it's going to be 6 months between episodes. Whereas we're just trying to record the whole thing. And
but you guys have fun doing it.
We do have fun doing it.
And Toby is very rightly was like, either we record this or we won't finish, which I think that for me, it is about that, it is about that relationship in the same way that you made that group for Ulysses, right? It's like, this is the same thing for me. And, between you, me, and the fence post, if it wasn't for Toby, I probably would have stopped a long time ago.
No stopping.
No, I know.
No,
I know.
TJ,
But
TJ and I, we drive each other on.
But you're also talking to someone who does. I do take years. I'm reading. I'm reading air quotes 6 books right now, and I'll just like.
What are you reading? When I had a podcast, I always ask this to my guests.
So
what are you reading?
I just finished Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which I love that book. I am reading a book called No Gods, No Monsters, Black Sea. Oh, what is that? Dang. Lies of Locke Lamora. And then there's like 3 others that are just in my backpack that I just take everywhere with me. But I will say Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, it felt like my palate cleanser. Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow was my palate cleanser between Finnegans Wake because it is so character and plot focused. I was like, I can do this. And it is easy.
This is how it could have been.
I was like, I know the words and I understand the relationship.
I know the words.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I remember. You know what my reward was for finishing Finnegans Wake was Darkonville's cat. That everyone says that is hard. I was like, oh my God, I understand the words.
Yes.
I don't need anything else.
Absolutely. Yeah, makes everything seem easy.
It isn't it? After you read Finnegans Wake or you pass your eyes over some Finnegans Wake, everything is easy. What are you reading?
I'm reading an American tragedy, Dreiser's American Tragedy, which is maybe 100 years old now, but that's part of another podcast that I listen to called Obscure, which is the podcast that inspired Wake. So I'm reading that. I just finished one called About Grace, which was Anthony Doerr's first novel. So he wrote All the Light We Cannot See and Cloud Cuckoo Land, and Cloud Cuckoo Land's maybe one of my favorite books I've ever read. It's unbelievable. And I read and my wife gave me his first book for my birthday, and I read, and I did not like it. He wrote it 20 years ago, and it's not. It's not the same. Shouldn't be on the same bookshelf. But yeah. And then I'm reading one very traumatic book at the moment called 5 Little Indians, which is about children being released from the Christian residential schools in Canada in the 1960s, and how
God bless you.
It's just trauma. But it's a big part of Canadian history, and so a colleague of mine loaned it to me, and I avoided it for the longest time, and now every night is my penance. Penance as
every night
as a white Christian man.
And Wake at the same time. Whew.
Yes,
no one deserves that.
No,
I mean, right before the Wake, I finished a book called Chain Gang All Stars, and the memory of that book has pushed me through the rest of the year. I'm like, this book was great. So
yeah, but we still maintain. I mean, we had some of my former students have appeared on the podcast, and as actors, they've come in really quite trepidatious about the process and got to the end and been like, that was so fun to get to say those crazy words, like just the challenge for actors to be able to speak these words and to be able to find the opportunity to say things that have no meaning, which is delightful. But yeah, I think the question of meaning, all those books that we just listed, all of them have some meaning. And the meaning is what drives us on. And I think if I was reading that same residential school book about Native Canadian people being abused, but it was in the style of Wake, I would not be trucking along. You need that story. You need that. So Wake is something that we do sometimes, but not often.
I think that has been my general. That has been the hardest thing to let go, because anytime I read a book, I'm like, you are trying to tell me something. And the Wake, I'm like, I'm sure he is. I'm not. I'm just not.
He's not trying to tell you something. He's dancing with himself. He couldn't care less about you.
Like we said,
we have to accept that he doesn't.
He's just
care
not that
about
into
us.
you.
He's not. He's not. Good for him. But the question is, in the way that, can we still consider this a book? Can we still consider this a novel? Is this still to be read in the same process that we use to read what we usually read? I don't know. I think it's...
You say you had a podcast, a literature podcast, but that's over now. I think you said that was on hold.
It's over now. I prefer to read.
What was the approach to the podcast?
It was, I would read my books and write endless about them, and then I would just let's say like book review, or there were things. Sometimes I did. Once I did the yellow wallpaper. Is this word?
Oh, yeah.
And I just went there and I started reading, and I would go like this. Okay, she says this and this. I think this book was written by this time and this time. So I tried to interpret based just on what I was reading, and I read the whole thing. And then I went, because usually I prepare myself to read a book. I just don't open and start reading. Mm-hmm. But so I did like this. I did a cold reading, and then I went to check again how many things I more or less got right. So I did this. I did a lot about Eco, because I had for 3 years I had a reading group. We read Umberto Eco in December. The first one was The Name of the Rose. It was so many people. I had 3 groups. I could not fit everyone in the same group. So I did preparation episodes about Umberto Eco a lot. I have several episodes of Sebald, and I had episodes that I would just invite the person would choose a book, and I would read it.
Wonderful.
Book with this person.
And what language is the podcast in?
It was in Portuguese.
In Portuguese. So
I started the podcast because I missed speaking Portuguese, and I understood that I know there are some words in terms not of semantics, but I was forgetting. Our language works like French with the verbs. I was forgetting my language a little bit. Right. So I thought it was a good way to keep in touch with my language, was to force myself to say something and to write and to speak in Portuguese.
Right. So just like with us, you're keeping yourself accountable by recording it and putting it out to the world.
Yeah, but not anymore. Not anymore. I think this is the last podcast.
So, what was the name of the podcast? If any of our Portuguese speaking listeners are interested in listening in,
it was Anatomia do Livro. It means the anatomy of a book, and I didn't notice until someone told me. But it says Ana to me, so Ana is like my name, Ana. Like all women that were born in my generation, we are called Ana.
Right.
But it's my brother that works with the restoration. And we were trying to find a name, and he mentioned this anatomy. He meant the several parts, physical parts of a book, and I thought this was good because it would. When I read, I try to go through the several parts of the narrative, how the characters work, how time goes, how space works. So I thought it would be the anatomy of a book in this sense. That's why it got the name. It has nothing to do with me. I'm not that full of myself.
I will link to that in our show notes. No, of course, I want to make sure that you get some listens. If I mean, obviously the language barrier is going to exclude a lot of people, but I'm surely there is someone out there who is interested. We have taken up a lot of your evening, and we don't want to ask much more of you. But this has been wonderful having you here with us.
So I was so nervous. I told some friends, "Oh my God, I cannot do this with my terrible English."
You held us in thrall for an hour. I don't see what you were nervous about, but obviously we honor your anxiety, and we all have our own anxieties. But this has been a real delight.
I was going to say thank you so much for being someone else who feels like this book is not interested in having a relationship with you. Because I've often been like, ooh, Toby's lucky I love him, you know?
And I have to say, if it wasn't for you guys and Cess, another person that was also reading, I would finish it, no matter what. But some people like you and Cess and another friend that was reading that started in September, finished maybe middle of October. Because sometimes I want to burn this book. How can people like just keep going. And then I would tell Cess, I think I'm understanding a little bit. He's like, yeah, no. You know?
Well,
I'm very thankful to the people. If there is something good about Instagram or podcasts or wherever we are, is this community that we help each other to become better readers, isn't it? And face these challenges that we want to go through.
Absolutely, yeah. It's it's been a real pleasure. We didn't really expect to discover this community either until we discovered that people were actually listening, because we started publishing these thinking it was just going to be, my mother listening, and even she was, had quit after a while. But suddenly we just discovered that today we're the number 6 drama podcast in Ireland. Somehow
Irish people are the best.
They love their Joyce, so anything that anything has the J word in it, they're gonna gravitate towards. So we love our Irish listeners, and all of our listeners. It's wonderful, and so having this community has been amazing. But that is all the time we have this week for Wake. We return next week to continue with our reading as we amazingly near the end of this tome. I've been Toby Malone, joined as ever by TJ Young, and it has been a real pleasure to have Ana Dahlberg here with us. Thank you, Ana, and I will link to your socials in our show notes so you can follow her journeys on her future difficult texts. It's always a pleasure. So thank you, Ana.
Thank you, guys.
No worries. Okay, so we'll see you next week, Crucial Verbalists. This has been Wake, a cold reading of James Joyce's Finnegans Wake, just to hear it out loud. If you've made it this far, thank you for your dedication. Join us next week for another segment of Finnegans Wake and a chat about what we've found. Wake is a Moon Street Media podcast, engineered by TJ Young and Toby Malone. Our theme song is The Ballad of Perso Riley, arranged and performed by Meg Logue after James Joyce. Wake is recorded in Canada, where Finnegans Wake is in the public domain. For community and bonus content, join us at our free Patreon at patreon.com/wakepod. If you have questions about Finnegans Wake, don't ask us. We're just as confused as you are. See you next week.